Hey everyone, this is Derek with the Conscious Resistance. I'm here in Philadelphia at the Free Your Mind Conference number 3, and I'm talking with Mr. Dennis McKenna. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Well, thank you for giving us a few minutes of
here.
your time. You're going to be speaking tomorrow.
Yes.
On a range of topics today and yesterday and tomorrow. We're hearing about consciousness, mind control, the occult, freedom, a lot of different topics. I wanted to give you a chance to tell everyone a bit, those who don't know you or know the work of your brother. First of all, what is your specific line of work? Why are you here? What is an ethnopharmacologist?
Okay, well, an ethnopharmacologist is kind of like an ethnobotanist. An ethnobotanist, ethno means people, right? Botany means plants. So ethnopharmacology is someone who studies pharmacology, like essentially biologically active substances that are used by indigenous people. Not necessarily drugs, they can be arrow poisons, they can be other kinds of things, but the formal definition, which is kind of tortured, but it's tortured because it's specific. Ethnopharmacology is the interdisciplinary scientific investigation of biologically active substances used or observed by humans.
Okay, very specific.
That's what it is, yeah. And my specialty in that has been psychoactive plants, particularly hallucinogens or psychedelics. I did my PhD work in South America on ayahuasca and the chemistry and botany and traditional use of that, and I compared that with another Amazonian psychedelic called ukuhe that very few people have heard of to this day. It had a similar chemistry and a similar pharmacology to ayahuasca, but different, but the plant sources and all that were different. So now everybody's heard of ayahuasca, nobody's heard of ukuhe, but my thesis was a long time ago. I did my work in 1981 there, and but it was a comparison of those two things. So that's ethnopharmacology for sure.
So your focus then has been, in your work, both with your individual work and your work with your brother, is promoting and exploring the ideas of, as you said, these substances that come from indigenous cultures and communities that they have used for a variety of reasons to have contact with the spirit realm and things of that nature. And since you first started doing the work in the early 80s, obviously, as you said, the world knows ayahuasca now, and there's a whole tourism industry behind that now.
Right.
How has that been from your perspective to see this change? Is this something that you felt was coming, or is it something that was unexpected?
It wasn't really that unexpected. I knew it was coming because this is what happens, when global culture impacts an indigenous culture, and we saw something very similar when mushrooms first came to the public's attention, in the 60s. There was an article published in Life magazine in 1957, and that really brought psychedelics into mainstream consciousness, and it was about mushrooms. And then in the late 60s, a lot of people started migrating, making pilgrimages to Huatla in Oaxaca and seeking the magic mushrooms. And much of the same impulse, I think, is behind the ayahuasca tourism thing. People lack meaningful experiences in this culture. They want meaningful spiritual experiences, but they also have this attraction to the idea of going to the jungle, the Amazon, find your shaman, all this sort of romantic stuff, which is not illegitimate. People have that desire for an adventure, and that it's been that has driven this ayahuasca tourism thing. And ultimately, I think there's some rough spots. Once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back. We can't fence off these indigenous cultures and say, let's leave them pure and pristine. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. We're in a global economy. Even ayahuasca itself has moved out of the Amazon. It's being grown in Hawaii, being grown all over the place. It's now gone to a global phenomenon. And I see this as a part of coevolution. I look at it from the coevolutionary perspective. So people say, well, this is terrible, and you're degrading the tradition, you're impacting these indigenous people, and you gringos are coming down here. You know, all these criticisms can be made, but the fact is this is inevitable, and I see it as part of the coevolution of ayahuasca and the human species. And I'm a believer that this is getting away from science, but I'm a believer that these plants, that indigenous people call them plant teachers, they are teachers, and they were put here to teach us, and that's part of the coevolutionary process. And now, and what they're trying to teach us, if you see my talk, is we have to rethink our relationship to nature. We have this idea happening that we're separate from nature, that somehow we own it and it's there for us to exploit. Well, we see the effects of 2,000 years or more of that attitude. We've got to rethink this, and the plants are saying, recognize that you're part of nature, you're part of this coevolutionary enterprise, and you don't know, you do not own nature, and you're not running the show, and you're an idiot, you don't know much. That's the basic message. And so we have to change that attitude in a lot of people before any of the other stuff that is impacting, the destabilization of our planet can really be seriously addressed. They always say it, if you want to make change yourself first.
Absolutely.
Then change your friends and so on. And that's how it works. And we can do this. Ayahuasca is absolutely the best plant messenger that nature has given us. And it's gone global because the planet, in the Gaia sense of the planet being a conscious entity, the whole planet is an organism, and it's getting desperate. As we further poison and destroy the mechanisms on the planet that maintain stability, ayahuasca and these other teacher plants, but especially ayahuasca, is moving out of the Amazon and basically saying, wake up, pay attention, you goddamn monkeys, you're really screwing things up. And just wake up.
It's really interesting that you make those points, because I agree 100%. First of all, that that mankind has up to this point seen nature as something else to have dominion over, and that's, as you said, that's led to all kinds of problems. And over the past year or so, I've been learning quite a bit from the Choctaw Nation and learning from native ways, and been blessed enough to have a couple of experiences with ayahuasca and learn those ways, and definitely agree it is one of the most powerful tools that we have to teach us about ourselves and to help us learn. And it's just been a beautiful experience to walk down that path and to learn from others who are actively listening and communicating, ready to have this conversation with, as crazy as it may sound, but with the plants themselves, with the planet itself, with nature itself, to connect to look for the communication.
This is what we have to do.
Absolutely.
And this is what ayahuasca is desperately trying to help us do, and doing it fairly effectively. I just don't know if there's enough time, but 5 years ago, 10 years ago, who had ever heard of ayahuasca and who gave a damn? But now, you can actually walk up to kind of any random person on the street and say, have you heard of ayahuasca? And chances are they have. They may not have taken it, but if they're wired into global consciousness at all, you can read about ayahuasca in the New York Times. They've run lots of articles.
It's definitely made it into the mainstream. So a couple other questions I wanted to get into. You co-founded the Hefter Research Institute. Can you tell us a bit about that?
That's correct. Yeah. Well, the Hefter Research Institute is a nonprofit organization like MAPS. Well, MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. Well, Hefter's much smaller, but in some ways it's more effective on kind of the science side. MAPS is a great spokesman for this research. Most of the people on our board are the leading researchers in neuroscience, clinical aspects, basic, clinical use of psychedelics. And it hasn't been, we founded in 1993. I was one of the original board members, and I am very much involved, kind of representing ethnopharmacology along this spectrum of disciplines that's part of the Hefter Institute. And as MAPS has kind of settled on MDMA as their focus for PTSD, for all sorts of reasons, it's very well suited to PTSD, and they're really pushing that. They want that to be a prescription medicine for specifically PTSD. And so they've really put a lot of their resources toward that. Hefter, again, not like it hasn't been anything planned, but the way it's sort of played out is we've focused a lot on psilocybin. Psilocybin is kind of the area that we've staked out, and we're looking at it for end-of-life applications, hospice, help people come to terms with the death and dying, looking at it for addictions, looking at it for, possibly PTSD, but more probably toward intractable depression and things like that. Johns Hopkins and New York University, UCLA are all very much involved in this. The group at Johns Hopkins recently completed a smoking cessation study with psilocybin with absolutely spectacular results. 80%, 85% of the subjects were smoke-free 6 months later. And these were 3-pack a day, 40 years, serious addicts. Smoke-free, 6 months later, nothing else in the smoking treatment pharmacopoeia even comes close to that. So something like that, and although it was a small study, get a lot of attention. And the government will have to come and say, well, this is a drug of abuse. On the other hand, tobacco is worse. So, we should maybe support this work. So that's what Hefter's doing. We're doing, if you go to hefter.org, HEFFTER.org, you can find all about the clinical studies we're involved with, the people on our board, what we're up to. And I highly recommend people to visit that website. We're being very effective, and we're doing it with we're getting funding, but to do these phase 2, phase 3 clinical studies takes really literally millions. That's the way they have it. The cards are stacked,
red tape, you gotta jump through all their hoops.
And so, but we're raising the money, but we need more funds, and people can learn about what we're doing on the website.
Yeah, you mentioned a number of great studies that are going. We've really seen. I read there was a great piece a couple of months ago in the New Yorker that was even talking about the revival of psychedelic research and mentioned those studies that you just talked about, and it's something
Michael Pollan's article about
exactly.
psilocybin.
That was to me. I was in the airport and I happened to see that, and the cover was all psychedelic looking. It's like the psychedelic revolution, and I picked it up on the way back from a flight, and it really blew me away that this mainstream magazine, the New Yorker, did like a 10-page article, really in depth, and a beautiful piece that wasn't negative in any way. Was actually showing the positive side effects, the smoking, as you mentioned, PTSD, end of life care, and I really like the idea they mentioned in there, and you sort of touched on it. This idea of psychedelic hospices that you could come to and close the end of your life out in a positive way where you
and why not?
Time.
Why not?
It's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, it's a beautiful idea, and it's certainly it's probably the first way that psilocybin will get into mainstream medicine, because it's not that threatening to the powers that be or the regulators or whatever. I mean, these people are dying, so. They have amount of slack in terms of what you can do with them. They're dying anyway, but so I think you will see it used in hospice situations, probably pretty soon. That will require a schedule change for psilocybin. Once that's done, that opens the door to all kinds of other research, because once a drug is taken off Schedule 1 and put in 2 or 3, it's still restricted, but it can be used medically. Yeah. It's recognized to have medical use, and it opens the door to off-label uses. So then therapists who want to use it for whatever will have a chance to do that.
Hopefully we'll see, or I believe, we're seeing it happen, but this return back to that, because many of the audience may know, the research that this was actually the case back in the beginning of MDMA's days and psilocybin, where people were actually able to get it through their therapy.
Yeah, exactly. So. Well, early 60s was psilocybin and early 80s with MDMA, and then that's right. So it is interesting the way that the conversation has changed. Psychedelics used to be something about, well, you didn't talk about it, or if you did talk about it, it was sort of like giggle and, and it wasn't really taken seriously. Now you can talk about it and people are not shocked. It's not taboo. And it's not a joke, it's not ridiculed, and people say, what? You can really stop addictions and cure depression and PTSD? What? And it can. And so it's it's great to see this happening. I mean, I have been teaching for about 10 years, and even in that period, I get a lot of students who come up and say, I want to do psychedelic research. I want to go into this field. 5-10 years ago, I would have said, well, don't, if you want to ruin your career, don't do it, if you do, because you'll never get anywhere.
Yeah.
But now I can actually say, yeah, go for it. This is the best time to do this, and we need a new generation of smart young people to come along and take the mantle, because I'm a geezer, all my colleagues are geezers, we're not going to be around forever.
We need the new generation of psychonauts and researchers in this.
Psychonauts, we got lots of those, but we need neuroscientists, and we need pharmacologists, and we need, and even, we're in the process of developing a new kind of neo-shamanism. We're borrowing from a lot of indigenous shamanic traditions, and we're also inventing our own way to deal with it. And this is the rewards of 40 years. Psychedelics have been around in our culture for more than 40 years, 50 years now. So they're not so scary as they were in the 60s. And we've learned how to use them. They've actually lived with them, and people have figured out there are safe and beneficial ways to use them. And it's just a matter of, that's going on. It's just a matter of getting that into, a therapeutic context.
We're definitely on the way. I've got 2 more questions. I'll let you get back to your work.
Sorry, I do tend to go.
No, I could do this all night. But so. Let's get the contentious one out of the way first. So you mentioned psilocybin a couple times, and I know that both you and Terrence were, if not the first people, you definitely popularized a popular method for growing mushrooms at home and things like that. Your experience with mushrooms, and for the audience those in the audience who are well researched in the history of psychedelics, of programs like MKUltra and the government's attempts to use these type of tools, because they are tools or technology that can be applied for good or other means. And because of that association, there are those who tend to feel like the promotion of these tools is always nefarious in some way, or trying to make people detached to not care about the world rather than to themselves better. And one way or another, Terrence McKenna's name has been associated with that to some degree, and others within the early psychedelic days having associations with CIA agents, or definitely there's some connections to Timothy Leary, and there's just a lot of questions. And obviously your connection to that scene, and as somebody else involved in that research, has brought your name in there. I just would like to hear your thoughts on the accusations that you or Terrence had something to do with the CIA, or anything that you may have experienced to shed some light on that. As far as how interested was the government in the early days of this research on psilocybin and all these substances?
Well, they were interested in all these things. Their MKUltra program, and before that, at the Biochemical Warfare Center at Fort Detrick, Maryland, they've been working with psychedelics really since the 60s, since the 50s. They've had programs. And then when it began to break out into society, they got interested in that and did, these experiments that were, highly ethically dubious, like dosing people, getting them with prostitutes and dosing the person in a hotel room and seeing what would happen. There's not an institutional review board on the planet that would approve that kind of thing. That's just totally outrageous. Was there a connection between Terrence or me and the CIA?
Psychedelic movement in general? Or?
I can't speak for the psychedelic movement in general, but I can definitively tell you that neither Terrence nor I ever had anything to do with the CIA. If you're talking about the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, you might say, well, I could crack a joke and say, yes, well, we worked for the CIA, we worked for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. But then some of your audience might misconstrue that. Yeah. So let me make it clear. He never worked for the CIA, and neither did I.
Do you know where this comes from? There's a specific talk he gave where he discusses agents. And
yes, I know where it comes from, and I will dissect that right now. He said in one talk something casually about, well, I was working deep cover for a while, and then they moved me into PR. right? And who the they are was never specified. But I can tell you who the they are, because those remarks, Jan Irvin either wasn't paying attention or was taking them out of context or is just an idiot, because the meaning of it is clear if you listen to the whole talk, and he is talking about he worked for the mushrooms, which he did understand, correctly or not, to be actually whether it was the mushrooms themselves or they were representative of an intelligent race that was controlling it, but he worked for the mushrooms. That was the they that he worked for, and he was deep cover. And that refers to the years when he was not in public, when he was actually in the basement growing mushrooms as furiously as he possibly could, distributing those. That's deep cover, right? Then he decided, well, this is not sustainable. Sooner or later, they're going to, catch up with me on this. So he decided to go into public relations, and he started talking about it a lot more, and that's when he became, the spokesman that he is. But he was working for the mushrooms, and for Jan to take this and construe it to mean that he was working for the CIA, I mean, it's a really tortured stretch that you have to make that connection, considering how it was the context. And also, I mean, his brother, I think I know, and we were involved in all this stuff together quite deeply. I've been to Esalen many times. Does that make me working for the CIA? Jan seems to think that everybody with having anything to do with psychedelics who happened to pass through Esalen was all part of this big conspiracy. Well, that's just utter horseshit. All kinds of people pass through Esalen. That doesn't mean that they're all involved in some conspiracy. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's just such sloppy thinking and uncritical thinking that I can't take it seriously. And when all this comes up, I just feel like, well, poor Jan. I mean, the guy needs to adjust his medications or something. I don't know. He's seriously deluded.
Well, I appreciate you addressing it. I know that there are people who are curious about that, so I figured we'd at least acknowledge the topic. And I appreciate you being willing to talk about something that is, I think, again, as you said, when you listen to the talk in context, I think it's clear what he was discussing, and
it's clear what he was discussing,
what he was saying. So thank you for addressing that.
And in the Free Your Mind conference, I mean, this is a great conference. It's very interesting, but I think there's a crossover of the demographics of the people that are interested in psychedelics and all that, and the people who are interested in mind control and conspiracy. And, with all due respect, I love this conference. I have an open mind, but there are people, and I don't think you'd disagree with it, who see conspiracies everywhere.
Absolutely.
There's fluoride in the water, this is a conspiracy. Vaccinations, this is a conspiracy. I don't buy that myself. And I think that one has to be careful. You can't abandon critical thinking. You have to look at things with skepticism and really, really think for yourself and evaluate things for yourself. And you shouldn't believe everything that they're telling you in that auditorium.
Or anyone, anywhere.
Or anyone, anywhere. Yeah. This is also what the priests are telling you, the police, the government, the academics. They're all practicing mind control. This is a form of mind control. Just this is how we would like you to think. That's the great beauty of psychedelics. It's an individual. You do not have to have faith to experience psychedelics. You do not have to believe anything. In fact, the more skepticism you can bring to the table, the better. Because it's in quintessentially individual experience. Mm-hmm. It's between you and the plant teacher or the teacher molecule or whatever it is you're choosing to ingest. So I tell people, don't believe what Terence McKenna says about psychedelics. Don't believe what I say about psychedelics. Don't believe what anybody says about psychedelics. Sit down, slam your ass in the chair, and smoke the pipe of DMT. make of it what you will.
You can have all the skepticism you want, but when that experience happens, it's going to take you wherever it's going to take you, regardless of how skeptical.
But you don't have to abandon your critical.
You still can come back. You can
say, okay, that's my DMT experience or whatever, and I interpret it as this and that. And some people might say, well, I interpret it as, I poisoned my brain and I was in an intoxicated state and never again, you know. Other people may say the universe opened up to me and there were cosmic entities, and fine. That's your reality.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you that there are, among a wide range of people, I mean, we have here, I think, a mix of people who are concerned with the philosophy of freedom, consciousness, mindfulness, psychedelics. So there definitely is a range of people, and going to be a range of critical thinking skills. And it is important to, obviously, information is being presented here to those with an open mind. You take what you can, whatever you can validate, whatever validates your experience.
Sure.
But it is important to remain rooted. And I really do appreciate that you bring in that perspective. One last thing. So we are here at the Free Your Mind conference. What is, I think you kind of alluded to it already, but what is your message that if you choose to speak out at this point in your career and your life and your work with your brother that really resonates with you, that could call out to humanity to move us forward, to propel us forward?
Well, this is basically what I'll be talking about in a certain way. I mean, I'm a plant person. I believe that ayahuasca and these other things were put here as plant teachers, and now ayahuasca's taken the center stage, but these others shouldn't be disregarded. Mushrooms are really important too, and these other things, But I think that I really believe that these things are, in a sense, ambassadors from the biosphere to us, to these primates, and they're trying to give us a message. And what we can do, as primates, or as part of this community of humans, is listen to them, but also get the message out. And I think we've reached a point where the simplest things, these plants are the most effective tool that we have to change hearts and minds on a global scale. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you do what plant people have always done. You grow plants, and you trade them across the back fence, and you encourage your neighbors to trade them, and that's the way plants propagate. And not only the plants, but then you also trade the knowledge of how to use these substances, and you create a new, revolution in consciousness that way, where people actually, have these technologies. Communities develop them, and they use them for their own purposes. It's kind of, the model is more like on the indigenous societies. We're not indigenous, but I think there are all kinds of things that people can do to make a difference, make the world better, not worse. I am just a humble botanist, so I work with the plants, and I just think that's my mission, is to talk about it and share this plant knowledge and encourage other people to do exactly this. Investigate it for yourself. One of the things I always loved about Terence was that he never accepted the mantle of guru. He was never there to tell people what to think. He was there, his message was, think for yourself. I'm here to encourage you to think for yourself. And then he would lay out all this stuff, wild ideas and so on, but always with a sort of, in some ways, tongue-in-cheek, not that he didn't believe it, but a tongue-in-cheek, approach, and say, well, do keep your perspective about this. Everything I'm telling you is quite possibly bullshit, but quite possibly not, so think for yourself.
Absolutely.
There's no more important message, getting people to think for themselves. That's where the interface between the psychedelic community and the Free Your Mind community is, because both are saying, think for yourself. Don't believe what the government tells you, or the churches tell you, or the politicians, the corporations tell you, or any of these institutions. Rely on your own, God-given brain and ability to think and figure stuff out. And that's a powerful message. And that's a message I can totally agree with.
Absolutely.
You know, so.
I really appreciate your time. Where can everybody find out more about your work and the book that you didn't even really mention the book? Let's mention that, I guess.
The book, my memoir, which I wrote, it's called The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, My Life with Terence McKenna. I finished that around the end of November in 2012, so it's been out a while. You can get it on Amazon. I have to get more up there, but you can still order it there. You can order it from my website, which is brotherhoodofthescreamingabyss.com without the in front of it, and that's where you can get it right now.
Awesome.
You know,
well, thank you for your time.
There's a Facebook page by that name. People can join that. And that's turned into a pretty interesting discussion forum for all kinds of crazy ideas. Good shit. You have to ask to join, but we don't turn people away unless they're clearly spammers, you know. That's all we turn away.
It's great to see you continuing your work, and you know, I feel like what you and your brother had already laid the groundwork for. Now it's beautiful to see the message spread, and you know, you guys really were pioneers in a lot of this work, and I really have to, you know, give you thanks and appreciation for what you guys do and continue to do. So thank you for your time.